June 12, 1943. 9:30 hours. Over northern France. The cold air over the French countryside vibrates with the roar of engines. Captain Walter "Bud" Mahurin of the 56th Fighter Group banks his Republic P-47 Thunderbolt into a steep climb, sunlight flashing off its silver wings. Below, two German Messerschmitt Bf-109s twist hard to evade. Mahurin presses the trigger. 8 50 caliber Browning machine guns thunder in unison. In seconds, the sky fills with flashes and smoke. One Bf-109 explodes mid-turn, the other dives for the clouds trailing fire. It is over in moments. Mahurin pulls up through the haze and mutters to himself. They never saw it coming. That moment was more than another dogfight over Europe. It marked the dawn of a new kind of air superiority. For years, German Luftwaffe pilots had dominated European skies. Their sleek, lightweight fighters, the Bf-109 and Focke-Wulf 190, were considered unmatched in agility and climb rate. Then came the Thunderbolt. Heavy, loud, and seemingly unwieldy, the P-47 looked more like a flying tank than a fighter. German intelligence dismissed it as another short-lived American experiment. They were wrong. What they didn't anticipate was the devastating firepower packed within its broad wings. 8 Browning M2, 50 caliber machine guns capable of tearing through enemy aircraft, locomotives, and even armored vehicles. Once the Thunderbolt appeared in the skies of occupied Europe, Luftwaffe pilots began to realize that agility alone was no longer enough. This was a machine built to survive, strike hard, and dominate at high altitude. The P-47 Thunderbolt would become one of the most feared and respected aircraft of World War II, an unlikely hero that transformed Allied air power and stunned the Luftwaffe. The birth of a beast. In 1939, as war erupted across Europe, the United States Army Air Corps was still flying outdated designs like the P-36 Hawk. The rapid advances in German aircraft technology shocked American planners. By the time the Bf-109E was dueling Spitfires over Britain, the U.S. realized it needed something revolutionary, fast, powerful, and capable of operating at high altitudes over long distances. Republic Aviation, led by designer Alexander Kartveli, answered that call. Kartveli had already designed the P-35 and P-43 Lancer, both capable but limited fighters. He believed the next-generation fighter needed something radical, a massive engine with a turbo supercharger system that could maintain power far above 25,000 feet. The result was the XP-47B prototype, which first flew on May 6, 1941. At first glance, the XP-47B looked enormous compared to other fighters. By 1942, production had begun, and the aircraft officially entered service as the P-47 Thunderbolt. The name fit perfectly. It was loud, powerful, and capable of delivering a storm of bullets. America's new fighter takes flight. When the first P-47s arrived in England with the 8th Air Force in early 1943, pilots were unsure what to make of them. Compared to the nimble British Spitfire Mach 9, the Thunderbolt seemed sluggish. It had thick wings, a massive fuselage, and a heavy frame. But what it lacked in finesse, it more than made up for in toughness. The R-2800 engine provided nearly 2,000 horsepower, allowing the aircraft to reach speeds of 430 mph at altitude, faster than most German interceptors above 25,000 feet. The turbo supercharger maintained that power level even in thin air, giving American pilots a crucial advantage when escorting bombers deep into enemy territory. Just as important, the Thunderbolt could take damage that would destroy most other fighters. Its rugged construction and air-cooled radial engine meant it could survive hits that crippled liquid-cooled aircraft like the P-51 Mustang or Bf-109. Pilots often returned to base with gaping holes in their wings, missing control surfaces, or even entire cylinders shot out, and still landed safely. Colonel Hubert Zemke, commander of the famed 56th Fighter Group, quickly realized what he had. He began training his pilots to fight using the P-47's strengths: high-speed dives, hit-and-run attacks, and overwhelming firepower. The P-47 wasn't built for turning fights, Zemke later said. It was built to hit hard and get out alive. German overconfidence. Throughout 1942 and early 1943, Luftwaffe pilots had grown accustomed to easy victories over Allied bombers and their early escorts. Their Bf-109Gs and FW-190As ruled the mid-altitudes of Western Europe. When American daylight raids began, German squadrons often shredded B-17 flying fortress formations with impunity. But the arrival of the P-47 changed the dynamic. At first, German pilots dismissed the new fighter's bulky silhouette. Reports from reconnaissance units described it as large and heavy, likely unsuited for high-altitude combat. Yet as soon as Thunderbolts began flying bomber escort missions in April 1943, the Luftwaffe started losing planes in ways they couldn't explain. The 50 caliber Brownings on the P-47 were far deadlier than anything the Luftwaffe expected. Each gun fired 800 rounds per minute, with armor-piercing incendiary ammunition designed to ignite fuel tanks and rip through metal. When all 8 fired together, the effect was devastating. One short burst could literally cut a Bf-109 in half. In combat reports from mid-1943, German pilots described Thunderbolts as unusually resilient and impossible to stop. Some claimed their cannon shells simply bounced off the thick airframe. Others warned that these aircraft could dive faster than anything in the Luftwaffe inventory, an advantage that would soon prove decisive. The 56th Fighter Group's test. On April 15, 1943, the 56th Fighter Group flew its first operational mission over Europe. Their orders were simple: provide high-altitude escort to B-17 bombers attacking targets in Belgium. The Luftwaffe scrambled interceptors as usual. At 25,000 feet, P-47s met Bf-109s head-on. Captain Francis Gabreski, one of Zemke's top pilots, spotted 3 enemy fighters closing fast. He dove sharply, throttled forward, and fired a 2-second burst. Tracers tore through the sky, striking the lead Bf-109's fuselage. The German plane disintegrated instantly. Gabreski's wingman later described it. It just came apart, like it had been hit with a sledgehammer made of fire. After that first encounter, the Luftwaffe began to take notice. Their intelligence analysts noted the new aircraft's ability to dive from 30,000 feet without losing control, something no German fighter could safely do. Soon, even veteran aces like Günther Rall and Erich Hartmann warned new pilots to avoid Thunderbolts in steep dives. By late 1943, the P-47's reputation was spreading fast. German pilots began calling it the Jug, a nickname that American pilots had already embraced, short for Juggernaut. It was fitting. Unstoppable, relentless, and capable of crushing anything in its path. Why the story matters. The story of the P-47. Thunderbolt is not just about technology. It's about adaptation, resilience, and the brutal learning curve of aerial warfare. The aircraft's arrival marked a turning point in the air war over Europe. For the first time, American pilots could challenge the Luftwaffe on equal, or even superior terms. The Thunderbolt paved the way for deep penetration bomber escorts and ground attack missions that crippled German logistics. Its sheer toughness saved countless pilots' lives, while its firepower shattered the myth of German invincibility in the air. By the end of the war, the P-47 had flown more than 500,000 combat sorties, destroyed over 7,000 enemy aircraft, and strafed thousands of trains, convoys, and tanks. It became the workhorse of Allied air power, earning the respect of both friends and foes. But in the spring of 1943, all of that was still to come. For now, in the skies over France, a few daring pilots were discovering just what this new machine could do, and German aces were learning, often too late, that they were facing a very different kind of enemy: fire and steel in the skies. The Republic P-47 Thunderbolt represented one of the most complex fighter aircraft ever produced during the Second World War. Its massive Pratt & Whitney R2800 double wasp engine generated approximately 2,000 horsepower and required a sophisticated turbo supercharger system located in the rear fuselage. The supercharger used exhaust-driven turbines to compress incoming air, allowing the engine to maintain full power even at altitudes exceeding 30,000 feet. This design made the P-47 exceptionally fast and powerful at high altitude, where most German interceptors lost efficiency. When tested in early combat trials, the aircraft achieved top speeds of 430 miles per hour at 30,000 feet. Its operational range initially reached only 500 miles, but external drop tanks later extended that distance to nearly 1,000 miles, allowing deeper penetration into enemy territory. The plane measured 36 feet 5 inches in length and had a wingspan of 40 feet 9 inches, with an empty weight exceeding 10,000 pounds. Fully loaded for combat, the Thunderbolt could weigh over 17,000 pounds, making it one of the heaviest single-engine fighters in history. Yet this immense weight contributed to its stability during high-speed dives, and allowed it to carry large quantities of ammunition, fuel, and bombs. Each wing housed 4 Browning M2 heavy machine guns, for a total of 8 weapons firing armor-piercing incendiary rounds at 800 rounds per minute each. A single burst from all 8 guns delivered a storm of bullets, capable of tearing through armor-plating engine blocks and aircraft fuselages. Test range experiments demonstrated that a 2-second burst could place more than 200 rounds on target at distances of 300 yards. This overwhelming volume of fire made the Thunderbolt deadly in both air-to-air and air-to-ground combat operations. Early versions of the aircraft, such as the P-47B and P-47C, suffered from reliability problems related to the turbocharger and electrical systems. Maintenance crews required extensive training to handle the complex network of ducts and control valves running through the fuselage. Republic aviation engineers quickly improved the design, producing the P-47D model by mid-1943, which became the definitive wartime version. The D model introduced a bubble canopy for improved visibility, self-sealing fuel tanks, and provisions for additional external ordnance. Factories in Farmingdale, New York, Evansville, Indiana, and later in Indiana, S. Curtis plant produced more than 12,000 units by the end of the war. This vast industrial effort reflected the enormous manufacturing power of the United States, which could outproduce Germany by staggering margins. German intelligence estimated incorrectly that fewer than 5,000 Thunderbolts existed by late 1944, unaware of the scale of Allied production. American pilots soon discovered that the Thunderbolt possessed an unmatched ability to dive at extremely high speeds without structural failure. In testing, the aircraft achieved dive speeds exceeding 500 miles per hour before compression forces became hazardous. This capability became a crucial tactical advantage, because German fighters like the Messerschmitt Bf-109G could not follow safely into steep dives. When attacked from behind, P-47 pilots often rolled inverted and plunged toward the ground, confident that their aircraft would survive where others would break apart. Colonel Hubert Zemke formalized this technique into doctrine known as boom and zoom tactics, emphasizing vertical maneuvers and speed retention. Pilots were instructed to climb high above enemy formations, attack in one decisive pass, and then use superior dive speed to disengage safely. This approach maximized the strengths of the P-47 while minimizing its comparative weakness in tight horizontal turns. Training manuals from the 8th Air Force described the Thunderbolt as a high-altitude, high-energy weapon platform, not a dogfighter. Nevertheless, skilled pilots learned to outmaneuver opponents using energy management and coordinated teamwork, rather than brute agility. By mid-1943, the 56th Fighter Group had refined these tactics to perfection, scoring increasing numbers of victories against experienced Luftwaffe aces. One of the first major encounters occurred on July 17, 1943, when Thunderbolts of the 56th and 78th Fighter Groups escorted B-17 bombers over Rouen, France. At 25,000 feet, more than 40 German fighters attempted interception, including elements of Jagdgeschwader 26 and Jagdgeschwader 2. The battle lasted less than 20 minutes, but demonstrated the Thunderbolt's devastating firepower and resilience. Lieutenant Robert Johnson found himself isolated after his flight broke apart during combat when his aircraft was hit repeatedly by cannon shells from a Focke-Wulf 190. Despite severe damage including punctured fuel tanks and shattered canopy, Johnson continued flying, returning fire with all 8 guns until the German attacker disengaged. He managed to bring his crippled aircraft back across the English Channel with over 200 bullet holes in the fuselage. Ground crews counted 21 direct hits on critical components, yet the aircraft remained airworthy, confirming the design AS legendary durability. Johnson AS report quickly circulated among Allied pilots, reinforcing their confidence that the Thunderbolt could withstand punishment no other fighter could endure. German pilots soon realized that engaging Thunderbolts head-on or from behind was suicidal due to concentrated gunfire. Standard Luftwaffe tactics relied on slashing attacks from above, but the heavy American fighters absorbed damage that would have destroyed lighter Spitfires or P-51s. Reports from Jagdgeschwader 26 described instances where multiple cannon bursts failed to disable P-47s, which continued fighting, despite losing sections of control surfaces. Luftwaffe technical officers conducted tests on wrecked Thunderbolts recovered from crash sites, noting exceptionally thick armor plating around the engine and cockpit. They concluded that the American design sacrificed agility for protection, yet its survivability fundamentally altered air combat engagements. German ace Günther Rall later admitted that fighting Thunderbolts required patience and teamwork, because single attacks rarely succeeded. He observed that the aircraft's high-altitude performance and dive speed made it almost untouchable during energy-based engagements. The Thunderbolt's turbo supercharger gave it dominance above 20,000 feet, where German engines like the Daimler-Benz DB605 lost power. This altitude advantage allowed American pilots to begin their attacks from superior positions, reducing exposure to return fire. Bomber crews flying in tight formations over targets such as Bremen and Hanover began to notice a dramatic decrease in German interception success. By autumn of 1943, the P-47 had become the backbone of Allied escort missions protecting daylight bombing raids deep into occupied Europe. Although range limitations prevented it from escorting bombers all the way to Berlin, at first it nevertheless forced the Luftwaffe onto the defensive. Each engagement inflicted attrition that Germany could not replace given dwindling resources and fuel shortages. The Thunderbolt also began assuming a secondary role as a fighter-bomber equipped with bombs and rockets for ground attack operations. Pilots discovered that its rugged frame and engine cooling system made it ideal for low-level strikes against railways convoys and armor concentrations. By late 1944, P-47 units operating in both the European and Mediterranean theaters were destroying locomotives, tanks, and artillery positions at unprecedented rates. The same 8.50 caliber guns that tore apart fighters also shredded soft ground targets, leaving columns of fire and smoke across retreating German lines. The combination of technological superiority, industrial scale, and tactical innovation transformed the Thunderbolt into a weapon the Luftwaffe could neither outfight nor outlast. Each new variant improved range, payload, and survivability until the aircraft dominated every altitude and mission profile assigned to it. By the end of 1943, German intelligence reports acknowledged that the P-47 represented the single most dangerous American fighter in Western Europe. Its power and endurance symbolized a shift in air warfare from lightweight maneuverability toward overwhelming firepower and durability. For the men who flew it, the Thunderbolt became both a weapon and a shield, capable of bringing them home through hellfire and steel. The battle for air supremacy, the defining moment for the Republic. P-47 Thunderbolt arrived during the late stages of 1943, when the Allied air campaign over Europe intensified dramatically. Strategic bombing missions deep into Germany required continuous fighter protection across hundreds of miles of hostile territory. The Luftwaffe still fielded experienced pilots, flying advanced Messerschmitt Bf-109G and Focke-Wulf FW-190A fighters that had dominated the European skies for years. However, the emergence of the Thunderbolt altered the balance of power in a way that shocked even the most seasoned German commanders. Every mission flown by P-47 squadrons from mid-1943 onward pushed the enemy further back both physically and psychologically. The German air defense network, which had once operated with precision coordination, began to show cracks as attrition mounted day after day. On August 17, 1943, the United States 8th Air Force launched a massive raid against the ball-bearing plants at Schweinfurt and Regensburg. This operation involved more than 376 B-17 flying fortresses, escorted partway by P-47 Thunderbolts from the 56th, 78th, and 353rd Fighter Groups. It was one of the first missions where the new aircraft would face concentrated opposition from multiple Jagdgeschwader wings defending central Germany. At approximately 1100 hours, German radar detected the bomber stream approaching the French border, triggering a scramble of over 300 enemy fighters. When contact was made at 27,000 feet, the Thunderbolts dove straight into the formation of F-190s, with their guns blazing. The sky erupted into chaos as tracers and cannon shells streaked in every direction, leaving trails of smoke across the blue expanse. Captain Walker Bud Mahurin of the 56th Fighter Group claimed 2 victories within minutes by executing steep dives through the German formation and pulling out at transonic speeds. The German pilots attempted to follow, but their wings began to compress under aerodynamic stress, forcing them to break off. American bomber crews watching from below reported scenes of Thunderbolts shredding enemy fighters with incredible bursts of firepower that lasted only seconds. Despite heavy losses among the bombers, the Luftwaffe paid an equally painful price, losing dozens of aircraft in encounters with P-47 escorts. After that mission, Luftwaffe commanders issued new orders instructing pilots to avoid prolonged combat with Thunderbolts whenever possible. They were told to strike bombers directly, then disengage before the escorts could respond, because the P-47's high-speed dives made escape nearly impossible. This adjustment revealed the growing fear among German squadrons, who began referring to the aircraft as the American 8-gun monster. Even ace pilots such as Adolf Galland acknowledged that the new Allied fighter posed a threat unlike anything the Luftwaffe had previously faced. He noted that its heavy armament and resistance to damage made traditional attack methods ineffective, forcing Germany to rely increasingly on surprise and numbers. The Luftwaffe could still inflict damage on bomber formations, but doing so required greater risks and led to mounting casualties among its dwindling pool of veterans. Throughout 1944, Thunderbolt units transitioned to long-range escort duty thanks to the addition of external fuel tanks. The ability to accompany bombers all the way to Berlin and back meant that German interceptors now faced constant pressure without respite. During missions over Berlin in March 1944, pilots of the 56th Fighter Group claimed 34 enemy aircraft destroyed in a single day. One of those pilots, Captain Gabi Gabreski, became the highest-scoring American ace in the European theater with 28 confirmed victories. He described the Thunderbolt's firepower as overwhelming, stating that a single burst from his guns could disintegrate any enemy plane caught in the crosshairs. German ground observers reported the terrifying sight of multiple Thunderbolts diving simultaneously on formations of interceptors, leaving fiery trails across the sky. The Luftwaffe's defensive coordination collapsed under the sheer speed and aggression of these attacks, which combined altitude advantage with unmatched striking power. As the Thunderbolt's reputation spread, morale among German pilots deteriorated rapidly. Young recruits entering Jagdgeschwader units faced opponents who not only outnumbered them, but also outgunned and outlasted them. Combat reports from early 1944 describe engagements where entire swarm elements were destroyed before they could even complete their attack runs. Pilots complained that the American fighters appeared invincible in both air and ground roles due to their armor and resilience. Even when damaged Thunderbolts frequently returned to base while Luftwaffe aircraft disintegrated after sustaining minor hits. The psychological effect of fighting such opponents cannot be overstated, because fear eroded discipline and reduced combat efficiency across multiple fronts. The Battle of the Bulge in December 1944 further demonstrated the Thunderbolt's versatility and destructive potential. During this German counteroffensive in the Ardennes, American ground forces relied heavily on fighter-bomber support to halt advancing panzer divisions. P-47 squadrons operating from forward airfields in Belgium launched relentless sorties against armored columns, supply lines, and troop concentrations. Each aircraft carried up to 2,500 pounds of bombs, or 10 5-inch rockets, in addition to its 8 machine guns. Within days, hundreds of German vehicles were destroyed, as roads became littered with burning wrecks and shattered artillery pieces. Pilots like Lieutenant Colonel David Schilling led multiple attack waves through intense flak and snow, reducing enemy mobility to chaos. German commanders later admitted that Allied fighter bombers, particularly the P-47, played a decisive role in breaking the offensive momentum. Enemy perspectives during this period reveal a profound sense of frustration and disbelief. Surviving German pilots interviewed after the war consistently described the Thunderbolt as almost impossible to bring down through conventional air combat. One Luftwaffe ace stated that his cannon shells seemed to vanish into the metal frame without visible effect even after several direct hits. Another recalled seeing P-47s returning home with flames trailing from their engines, yet continuing to fight until they crossed back into friendly territory. Technical officers analyzing wrecked Thunderbolts discovered layers of armor protection surrounding vital components far exceeding German design philosophy. They concluded that the aircraft's ruggedness combined with industrial-scale production rendered it strategically undefeatable, despite local tactical successes. The numbers tell the full story of this dominance. By the end of 1944, Republic Aviation and associated contractors had produced over 15,000 Thunderbolts. Operational records show that P-47 units flew more than 500,000 combat sorties during the war, destroying over 7,000 enemy aircraft in air-to-air combat. Ground attack missions accounted for thousands more kills against vehicles, locomotives, and troop convoys throughout occupied Europe. Loss rates remained relatively low compared to other Allied fighters thanks to the aircraft's ability to absorb damage and bring pilots safely home. The Luftwaffe, by contrast, suffered catastrophic depletion, losing both experienced aces and new recruits faster than replacements could be trained. By 1945, Allied air superiority was complete, and the once feared German fighter arm lay shattered both materially and spiritually. The Republic P-47 Thunderbolt's success was not merely technological, but symbolic of Allied strategic philosophy emphasizing power, endurance, and mass production. Where German engineering sought precision, perfection, and agility, American industry produced machines of overwhelming strength and reliability. In the hands of skilled pilots, these machines turned the tide of war, ensuring control of the skies over Europe until final victory in May 1945. Legacy of the Thunderbolt. When peace finally returned to Europe in May 1945, the Republic P-47 Thunderbolt stood as a monument to the industrial and tactical power of the Allied nations. More than 15,683 Thunderbolts had been produced in total, making it one of the most numerous fighter aircraft in aviation history. It had served in every major theater of the Second World War, from the skies above Normandy to the jungles of Burma and the islands of the Pacific. Its pilots collectively flew over 1.5 million operational hours and delivered more than 135,000 tons of bombs on enemy targets. No other single-engine aircraft during the war matched this combination of range, payload, firepower, and durability in combat. German pilots who survived the conflict often admitted that the appearance of the Thunderbolt signaled the beginning of the end for the Luftwaffe's dominance. They understood that the age of lightweight, fragile fighters had passed forever, replaced by machines that valued resilience and firepower above all else. The Thunderbolt's post-war legacy extended far beyond its wartime achievements because it represented a transition in fighter design philosophy worldwide. Its massive radial engine and heavy frame demonstrated that air superiority could be achieved through brute strength rather than pure agility. Engineers studying captured aircraft and combat data recognized that survivability and versatility had become decisive attributes in modern air warfare. Republic Aviation continued to refine these concepts in the jet age, producing the Republic F-84 Thunderjet, and later the supersonic F-105 Thunderchief. Both aircraft carried forward the lineage of their piston-powered ancestor, emphasizing payload endurance and battlefield impact over maneuverability. The lessons learned from the P-47's performance influenced not only American aircraft development, but also Soviet and British fighter programs in the early Cold War years. Designers in multiple nations adopted thicker wing structures, improved armor layouts, and increased ammunition capacity as standard features in new generations of fighters. Statistical analyses conducted by the United States Army Air Forces after the war revealed astonishing performance results for the Thunderbolt. Across all combat theaters, P-47 units achieved a confirmed kill-to-loss ratio of 5.7 to 1 in air-to-air engagements. The aircraft destroyed more enemy planes on the ground than any other Allied fighter, while maintaining a mechanical reliability rate exceeding 95%. Maintenance crews reported that damaged airframes could often be repaired in days, because the rugged construction resisted catastrophic structural failure. Many Thunderbolts that returned from missions with severe battle damage were restored to full service with minimal replacement parts. Such resilience saved hundreds of pilots who would otherwise have been lost during extended operations deep within hostile territory. The reputation of the Thunderbolt spread quickly among Allied ground forces, who nicknamed it the friend with the big guns. Soldiers on the Western Front described its arrival as the sound of salvation, because its .850 caliber guns and bombs obliterated enemy armor and fortifications. During the Normandy campaign alone, Thunderbolt squadrons destroyed over 6,000 vehicles and disrupted countless supply lines feeding German defenses. Its ability to carry 2,500 pounds of bombs allowed it to serve effectively as a tactical bomber, capable of supporting advancing infantry divisions. This ground attack role continued into the closing months of the war, when the Luftwaffe had virtually ceased to exist as an organized force. By early 1945, P-47 pilots spent most of their missions strafing trains, convoys, and airfields, ensuring that Germany's military infrastructure collapsed completely. After the war, thousands of surplus Thunderbolts were transferred to allied and friendly nations through various military aid programs. Countries such as France, Brazil, Mexico, Italy, and Turkey operated the aircraft well into the late 1950s. In Latin America, the P-47 became a symbol of modernization and power, as nations sought to rebuild their air forces using proven American designs. Brazilian Thunderbolts saw combat in the Italian campaign under the Brazilian Expeditionary Force, marking one of the few instances of South American combat participation in Europe. Even in post-war years, the aircraft retained its fearsome reputation because pilots admired its reliability, simplicity, and forgiving flight characteristics. For many developing air forces, the P-47 served as both a training platform and an operational strike aircraft bridging the gap to the jet era. From a strategic perspective, the Thunderbolt's greatest contribution was psychological rather than numerical. It proved that Allied technology could produce a machine that combined devastating power with unmatched survivability and versatility. The Luftwaffe's morale never fully recovered from repeated encounters with formations of these heavily armed fighters, dominating both air and ground. Captured German documents revealed that many pilots considered the P-47 more dangerous than the P-51 Mustang at low and medium altitudes. They feared its 8-gun barrages, which could destroy entire formations within seconds, leaving no time for evasive maneuvers or counterattacks. This fear translated into tactical hesitation that crippled German interception effectiveness during the final years of the war. The numbers remain staggering and tell their own story of industrial might and tactical evolution. A total of 15,683 Thunderbolts built, over 546,000 sorties flown, 7,036 enemy aircraft destroyed in aerial combat, 6,000 plus armored vehicles neutralized, 9,000 locomotives eliminated, 100,000 trucks and motor transports annihilated, an average pilot survival rate exceeding 93% per mission. These figures underscore the unmatched contribution of the P-47 to the Allied victory in Europe. In historical reflection, the Republic P-47 Thunderbolt stands not only as a weapon of war, but as a technological statement of its era. It demonstrated that brute industrial capacity coupled with sound engineering could overcome even the most advanced designs produced by adversaries. While the sleeker P-51 Mustang often receives credit for winning air superiority, the Thunderbolt carried much of the fight through the darkest years. Its engines roared across continents, delivering justice in streams of fire that shattered the Luftwaffe and paved the way for liberation. Every burst from its 8 guns told a story of determination, ingenuity, and courage, etched permanently into the history of air warfare. The pilots who flew it knew they commanded not just a machine, but a force of nature forged in steel, smoke, and thunder. The legacy of the Thunderbolt endures wherever modern air forces emphasize endurance, precision, and survivability as the keys to victory. It remains a legend among aviation historians as the embodiment of raw American power harnessed for freedom's defense. Even decades after the last operational P-47 left active service, veterans still recall its distinctive sound and its unbreakable spirit. For them and for the generations that followed, the roar of the Thunderbolt will forever echo as the sound of victory in the skies above Europe.